You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Eric Reese, Morgan Burkett, and our special guest, Mike Greger from the Eagles team at PSN. What's going on, gentlemen?
Yeah, not too much yourself.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm alive. Can't complain, right? Still bald.
It's a good thing. We would have been more late if you weren't doing well. So
technically, it says we start at 7:35. Oh, damn, 7:38.
Yeah,
all right, you got a point.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Got that final Jeopardy answer in, so it's all good.
Zach called you out too.
And shout out to Zach Charvalella, who's actually the latest out of all of us because he's not even here. So shout out to Zach.
Dang.
Ron, what's going on? Little G Griffith, you're still gonna be an uncle. Proud of you. Happy for you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations on being an uncle.
You know who needs congratulations? Well, this is perfect. Look at that perfect segue. Nick Sirianni. Congratulations to Nick Sirianni for keeping his job for another season. Although last year was as had I had hair, I would have started losing hair after what happened last year and how everything transpired.
You don't though.
I don't. And I didn't lose my beard hair, which is a huge plus. It's great.
Yeah.
Eric has a beautiful beard. We need to acknowledge it. And shout out, hey, happy anniversary to Eric, who's choosing to spend his anniversary with us. So definitely,
yeah.
Shout out to you.
That's I want to take that on the chin later. It's okay. It's fine. Be all right.
That's love, bro. That's love.
That's how it goes. Just how it goes.
Diana Rossini came out with an article and a podcast over the weekend, kind of detailing what transpired last season from what we saw from Nick Sirianni, and it seemed as if Nick was just never comfortable at all where he is in his seat after losing Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. He hired Sean Desai. He hired his backup plan and Matt Patricia. He promoted Brian Johnson. And let's start with the offense, right? Because that's my main focal point, because I feel like I preached this a lot last season. But it was Sirianni's offense at the end of the day. Like, this guy was calling a very bland offense and expecting defenses to not realize he was running the same offense from the year prior. And even so from the year prior to that, before Shane Steichen took the reins. Kind of just looking at bold picture. Hearing all that information and knowing exactly what transpired, are you guys comfortable with Sirianni going into this season? Let's start with that.
I have more faith that he'll allow the coordinators to kind of do what they need to do versus what he had last season, just because he's brought in the right coaches. So like Fangio and more, they're established in the NFL. Last season, I felt like he still didn't trust his hires, and I think we all felt that as fans when they were hired, because it was kind of like a shrug, like, oh, who are these people? Do they have any like background as far as like being in the NFL and for us to stand on it in good faith? The fact they're going to be good coordinators, and nobody really could say yes. Now this time around, I think it's different and there's more trust. So as long as Sirianni can back off just a little bit, even from just to go back to what he did, 2 seasons ago, then I think we'll be fine. The bigger question, I think, ends up being the relationship between him and Hurts.
Yeah, I think Eric hit it on the head. I think just bringing in the right guys will solve a lot of the issues they had last year. Clearly, Sirianni had some trust issues with the guys he brought in last year, who he thought were going to do their jobs a certain way. Clearly had issues letting go. I think that you bring in new veteran coaches for that reason, right? There's just not that that same, question mark about how they develop. So you're hoping that just the veteran experience alone will allow kind of Sirianni to take that backseat a little bit. So most of those things should sort themselves out. But I agree with Eric. It'll be interesting to see as the season goes on how those relationships within that coaching structure change and develop.
I too agree with Eric. For me, though, to read that report that came out, it's kind of what we thought was happening. It was just kind of like seeing it in print spelled out for you, which is confirming the fear or the actuality of what everyone thought was happening. So for those reasons, I think I don't know how you could have fired Sirianni 2 years coming off a Super Bowl. Just the optics of it to me would have looked terrible. And I'm not a huge Sirianni guy personally. I just don't think you can do that, especially the way Peterson was shown the door too early. And then they're always going to go back to, they have this longing for Andy Reid and not waiting that out maybe another year or two. So to pull the trigger this early on the Sirianni experiment, I think would have been a mistake. And then last year, I think with the Brian Johnson move, it was more to keep Hurts like locked in with the same kind of his guy. Like, I mean, I know he went from quarterbacks coach to coordinator, but it was kind of like not a massive jump for him to change the whole offense around. Obviously it did because Steichen wasn't there, but I mean, the comfortability and the stability at the coaching spot, I think was the impetus for that. And then the Desai move was just a debacle because they wanted Fangio and that whole thing kind of blew up in their face. So don't necessarily blame them for the way that happened. And unless you want to say they should have hired Wilson, the secondary coach, who everyone was high on. That would be the only argument I could have made there. But I guess I got a little long-winded there. But yeah, I do think he deserves another year. But as Eric said, the biggest piece of this is the relationship between Sirianni and Hurts, because that has to work. As Rossini said, there was a quote in her story about that, letting your franchise quarterback be the franchise quarterback and not being too conservative with their play calling. And I don't think Kellen Moore will do that just based on what I've read and some of the tape I've watched on how he runs the offense.
So you guys put me in a hell of a predicament because this just means I got to be the bad guy in this whole scenario. So shout out to Eric for leading off and then Mike batting cleanup. But I don't mind it because I feel like I've preached this enough. I like Sirianni. I like the gardener of Sirianni. I don't like the kid that hit puberty Sirianni. And that's what it felt like last year. Like he hit puberty and it's like, he could be that guy. He was feeling himself a little too much. And it's just like, you said it right there, Mike, right? Letting the franchise quarterback be the franchise quarterback. The fact of the matter that, we saw Kenny Gainwell trying to be used as a featured back, although how he traded for DeAndre Smith was mind-blowing. Then later on in the season, when A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts kind of, said, hey, yeah, we're improvising out there because, honestly, the offense is too bland and people understand what we're doing. Like, those kind of things was just like, I wouldn't say firing Sirianni last season would be justified. I just feel like there has to have been a better scenario for the Eagles because this is what I'm looking at right now. If the Eagles reach the playoffs this year, right, but they don't make it to the big dance, they don't make it to the conference championship, let's say that, right, that it's a little bit of a falling short of expectations because the way this team is now built. But you get to the big dance, then you have Kellen Moore interviewing. Now, you're in a scenario where, like, if you fire Sirianni, what if you take too long to make that move and Kellen Moore actually moves on? But the offense was actually pretty damn good. And they just, they fell too short because possibly Sirianni stepped in the way with, wanting to be the guy at the big dance and showing that he's more than capable. My level of trust for Sirianni or my level of comfort is very, very, very low right now, just because it seems like he's the type of guy that he's gonna trip on his own shoelaces at some point. It's just a matter if it's going to be at a very detrimental point in the season or it's just early on where it's kind of like he's trying to find his footing.
Well, yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting too is that, you have this kind of organization. You have this organization that really, historically likes to promote from within, right? That's not necessarily Sirianni's go-to, right? Like, I think that, if Kellen Moore leaves, then you just hope that you can get another great OC, and that's got to be a change of mindset for the organization now. And you're looking for coaches, as much as you want to develop from within, all the great coaches you talk about, like their coaching tree, it doesn't mean that, every coach is a coach developer as well. Obviously, you hope they learn things and stuff like that, but Sirianni's still early, in his tenure. He's still got a long way to go. He can still develop teams and bring in the right coordinators and get this team to where they need to be. I think, the offset of that is he's probably, needing to work on his coach development skills, which he can then learn from the veteran coaches as well. So I don't think that, the new coaches that he brought in or the ones he promoted are an indication of him as a coach, maybe as a coach evaluator, but you hope that problem's solved now this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about coordinators leaving per se, because I think if this thing doesn't work next year, they're going to blow it all up, and it's going to be a whole new coaching staff. So from that aspect, I wouldn't worry about it. But the only monkey wrench I'll throw in about Sirianni getting fired, and like I said, I would not have fired him, was the talent that was out there. You could make that, if you want to make that argument, that you had Vrabel, you had Belichick. I think Carroll took a job in the front office, I think, but you had legitimate options, Harbaugh, obviously, that if the timing of it would have been a good time to do it. So if you want to argue that that's the reason you should have axed Sirianni, then I totally get that. And that's a very valid argument.
I would have been all in if the Eagles made a move for Vrabel. He stands out like another Dan Campbell, but Vrabel I feel like is a little bit more savvy with his role. And he's a leader among men, and I feel like that's I'm trying to dance around the words, but Vrabel seems like the guy. He's a no nonsense kind of guy, but he loves his guys no matter what. And I feel like we had that with Sirianni at one point, but the Super Bowl could have been his biggest poison just because he was on the grandest stage, and even on the grandest stage, while yes, it's great to have fun, it's also great to realize that you are part of the face of the franchise. Like you're the head coach of a prestige franchise that's in the Super Bowl. So to act out of line at times, to have, God, I hate to say this, to have your babysitter on the sideline, to have a babysitter on the sideline to keep your emotions in check, and for you to flare up when that babysitter gets banned, I think to me it's unheard of. Like it feels like a bad telenovela that we're watching about a football team, or a Key and Peele skit. Like just these things, you don't see this happen. Like you don't see a Vrabel like flare up like on the sidelines, and a rumor that he has Arnold Schwarzenegger as his babysitter. Like it's just weird. And just a quick shout out. So as Zach has mentioned, Cooper DeJean, it will be sidelined for 3 weeks with a non-football injury, little hamstring injury, but hoping to see him soon enough, at least. Long off season ahead.
Yeah, I mean it'll be fun to see when he's obviously healthy. But one thing about Sirianni, and I agree exactly with pretty much the sentiment that's been going around here. If he was on the way out and the Eagles need to hire somebody, this season on offense is a great audition for Kellen Moore to take a role here, and I think that would be something that would benefit the team if they did end up going that route. But I also think that in the same vein, setting the expectations high at like Super Bowl might be a little bit, asking for a little bit much, just because we're depending on a defense with so many question marks that we do need, I think, one more season. So like it's not this season. I would be surprised if they win the Super Bowl this season. But the season after is what I'm really looking for as the window. The window closes right there.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you talk about kind of the unprecedented situation that the Eagles face, with their head coach and their coaching staff. The other way that I see it kind of being one of a kind is that Sirianni, he's almost like that CEO head coach they're talking about, which, has existed and it's not the first time we've seen one of those, but it is kind of uncommon for successful teams over the long term, right? So, there's been examples, right? But, you usually depend on a head coach that's involved in the offense or the defense. They kind of work as a pseudo coordinator. And it seems like that's just not Sirianni's skill. And again, when he came in, we thought that was what we were getting, right? One of those experienced OCs. He had some wrinkles. was fairly new to play calling, but had some experience, et cetera, right? It just doesn't seem to be one of his skills. So it would be interesting to see, if it is successful, right? Are the Eagles kind of setting the tone for the future and kind of, I think that what it is that it's more so, not whether or not we stick with Sirianni, because again, we talked about how the coaching tree you can bring in other guys, you can bring in veteran OCs. Is this just going to be kind of like a new change where we're used to Andy Reid, where he's involved as a coordinator, et cetera, and this guy's just not going to be that guy, and he's just kind of going to sit back there, and the Eagles are going to have to bring in veteran OCs and DCs.
I think you hit on something there, because I think as long as Howie Roseman is in charge at the front office, I think you're never going to have the final say. He's always going to be meddling in game day decisions, like personnel decisions, and probably I think he probably offers like play calling advice. Like he wants to be like the fantasy football guy. Like he's very involved from what I can understand. I don't have any significant proof to this, but it just seems that way. And there have been reports to this when Peterson was there, for making decisions on actives and inactives, which shouldn't be happening to a head coach. So I think it's always whoever's coaching the Eagles is always going to be kind of stuck in that role where he's going to have to excel at being a CEO, and it can be done. I mean, John Harbaugh is the best example of that in Baltimore. Like he can't call a game. He picks the best coordinators. He manages what he can manage as the CEO, head coach does in that way, and he's very good at it. And Baltimore is always a good football team, so it can be done. But is that the way it should be done? That's a whole nother debate. I don't know. It's not the way I personally would want my football team to be run. But if it's working, then hey, it's working. Go for it.
I don't mind the approach at all. I mean, if that's going to be his role to be a CEO, like one thing I can really give him kudos for is like he builds great relationships, right? Like he's that guy in the locker room that he rides for his players. He speaks, candidly of his players, and he sticks up for his guys, which is phenomenal. You want to see that. Like that's a great head coach. But a great head coach also knows, like, hey, if you ain't got it, you ain't got it. At the end of the day, like if you can't play call, you can't play call. And I feel like, if last season was gonna be such a grind, then like as a fan, I'm curious to see what that grind would have actually been like had we had Brian Johnson's wrinkle in the offense, or Brian Johnson play calling to his advantage. Just seeing like those dynamics, because I feel like Sirianni was scared to experiment because of the success from the year before, which is understandable. But his fear just led to like a lot of foolery. I mean, the Kenny Gainwell stuff in the first week was mind-boggling to all of us. Just the way the offense looked was just so bland, and then the move to I still don't 100% believe that he was behind the whole Desai and Patricia thing, because like Mike alluded to, like how he's like Thanos. He has the the team in his grip. Like it's that tight. But if he's been taking the blame for it, right? So like if that was truly his doing, then it's like, okay, like it's another thing. You stub your toe on that one too, and it's like this is a team, like if this was a Chicago Bears and you're making these mistakes, cool, do your thing, man. Just have fun. Do whatever you're gonna do to build it from the ground up. Next season's next season. But this is a contender. This is a team that got the break speed off of them by the 49ers, even though they blew them out in the NFC Championship game. I'm not want to hear about Brock Purdy because I feel like he's still not that guy that people say he is. But like the expectations are there for a reason, because this team is there. They're elite for a reason. And I just feel like Sirianni he had a weird case of just like anxiety, the best way to say it. Like just that anxiety attack where everything's just falling around you and you want to control everything you can. That was just the outcome to me. Now going into this season, like as Mike is saying, like, the CEO coach approach. Should copyright that one. Going into that, what are you expecting to see out of Sirianni from the leader standpoint, and from just pretty much from the leader standpoint? Like, do you feel like you will see a mature version? Like Harbaugh was a very, very good comparison, because that he's one of the better coaches in the NFL, and he's been doing it for a long time. Do we see Sirianni cross that path where it's like, okay, like I gotta kind of keep myself in line, or do we still see the Sirianni that was talking about that he was bragging to a Giants fan that we got their best player?
Yeah, aside from the football strategy, play calling stuff, I think you were talking, Brian, about just the attitude. Like, it's fine when you're winning if you want to like yell about Giants fans, and like I remember in a press conference I was at 2 years ago, and he came in, and there was like press from other city. I forget which team it was. There was press. It might have been Dallas actually. There was press from out of town in the room, and then they kind of left to go to the other locker room. And he's like, "All right, they're out of here. Only Philly questions. Let's go." And it was like, well, all right, that's kind of corny, like to say something like that. And then I might start some crap here, but bringing your kids up to the press conference, like it's cute one or two times, and then like it's business. It's a business meeting. You don't need to have all that other distraction. I almost feel like it's a shield after a loss if you bring a kid up. It's like, okay, now we can't drill this guy because he's got these cute kids up here on the stage with him. But like he's got to figure out a way to straddle that line between being charismatic and it's okay to be emotional, but to be like a charismatic leader versus being the class clown. Because when you're winning, sure, it's funny and it's no one's going to care. But when you're not winning, it comes off really bad, and it's not going to fly in a lot of towns, but definitely not in Philadelphia.
That'll definitely show this season too, because with the way that the season ended last year, just kind of on a decline. I think that he's lost the room in some ways, and he's, in order to get that back, he needs to just be hands off. Just let the coordinators do their thing. That's not I think he does need to be the manager and just have the coordinators implement their style, and then try to really work on having a relationship with the players in the locker room and like on the field, and like keep that morale going throughout the season, because that's what he, if anything, is probably the best at with everybody who's implemented in their positions right now. But if that also might be what saves him from his job too, because if Kellen Moore's if he's completely hands off and Kellen Moore smashes it out of the park with his offense, then the relationships don't grow between specifically Sirianni and Hurts, then you can probably make an argument that, well, I have an offense that Hurts will probably stick around and find out with Kellen Moore probably even next season. Just making your head coach, because if that doesn't fundamentally grow between Sirianni and Hurts, then you kind of lose him, a seat for him.
Yeah, I think Eric and Mike kind of nailed it on the head for me. It kind of fits into two different categories of where I see success, and there's kind of some parallels with other coaches we see. So the first one, shout out to the guys playing, college football 25 right now. But if you're a coach in college, what you can be is a recruiter, right? A good recruiter. And that's a legitimate thing we see all the time in college. Like the head coach, kind of more of a figurehead, right? Like they're not necessarily as involved in coordinating, but they're a great recruiter. And the biggest thing for that is brand, right? What are you putting forward? You're talking about interviews, right? You're talking about, the Nick Sirianni brand. It's not even that he changed so much from the last year to the year before, but just like he kind of became this, more emotional person. It was just that brand he was pushing. It's not necessarily completely changed the script or anything, but you notice, okay, the emotions coming out of the seams when the going gets tough, right? And that's just all part of your brand. So if you're going to be a good recruiter, you really have to watch how you're behaving, in the public eye, right? Or there's, the other way that I would judge him, and we see this a lot. We talked about how the NFL is becoming more and more like the NBA, where you're kind of building super teams, right? And you're bringing in talent. Well, what do we see all the time with NBA coaches is, these coaches that, again, are kind of figureheads, but are managing the emotions and the expectations of their superstars, right? We see it all the time. There's plenty of coaches that get trophies, and you're like, it's LeBron calling the offense. Let's be honest here, right? Like it happens all the time. And this is one of those teams you really just kind of have to stay out of their way. And I'm sure the coordinators are going to bring in, some good play calling, some stability, and that's going to really help. But all Nick Sirianni really has to do is manage the emotions of his superstars, right? And to his credit, the one thing that we haven't seen much of is public, right, of back talking or whatever it is, negative talk, negative speech. Like we hear the rumors and the murmurings from the locker room, but it never gets out. And what do we talk about? For years is it's always getting out of the locker room. It's always getting out of the locker room. And since Sirianni's been in there, it hasn't, right? And so there's some management going on behind the scenes there. So I think those are kind of the two ways that he can still be successful and the Eagles can still be successful. And they're not really about his ability to call offensive plays.
And to that point, if it is, always staying behind closed doors, then that's sort of like you're gonna have your outs with your head coach if you're, a star player. So maybe it's not even as toxic as everybody as the media makes it seems with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. Maybe it's they're going to clash because last season the struggles were absolutely apparent, but I don't think. See, I don't know that the relationship is something where it's like it can't be mended.
It just seemed like at times like Sirianni was just a bit out of line, and Hurts is a private guy. Hurts is kind of just dude, let's get the work done, let's get the hell out of here, and I just want to win. Like that's at the end of the day, and obviously they didn't win at all last season. Obviously we saw the circus theatrics from Sirianni, but I feel like a real tell of like how Sirianni looked last season was kind of like when Saquon was talking to Diana. He's like, when I was on the other sideline, like pretty much Sirianni was the butt of our jokes. And then now I'm with him, and it's kind of like, like this is the kind of guy you want on your sideline. But it's just, again, it's just how you look in the public eye, right? Like you're the head coach of a multi-million-dollar corporation. Like you're right there in the front line, and how you're viewed is how they're gonna view guys like Jalen, guys like AJ, guys like Devontae. It's gonna it's gonna trickle down to these guys because then they got to answer questions about you at the end of the day. If you're acting like an asshat, we know Philly media is gonna go to Jalen and be like, hey, Nick is acting like an asshat. What's that about? Jalen's not gonna say anything, and that's gonna be an issue. Or AJ's not gonna say anything, that's gonna be an issue. Like things could get blown out of proportion in the blink of an eye in this market. And I just feel like Sirianni you got to have a reflecting moment. It's kind of like, hey, like I've got to temper myself. I've got to put everything from last season to rest and just focus on the end goal here. And it's just, I guess it's that level of maturity. I'm waiting to see it because, right now I feel like he's still stuck in that, like, hey, I'm a head coach. Like, shit, I'm a head coach phase. Like, as opposed to, like, I'm a head coach. Here's what we got to, conquer John today.
And to that, I think, if he doesn't get out of that, as you were pretty much saying, like, this is his pretty much audition to remain a head coach if he doesn't get out of that funk.
So Brian, would you say that Nick Sirianni's, ability to stick around for the next year or chances of sticking around are higher based on the team win rate, like the overall performance of the team, or do you think it's more dependent on how he handles the season? Like if they go, 11-5 and they get to the Super Bowl or 11-6, sorry, or 12-5, and they get to the Super Bowl and then they lose, but he's been an asshat, like you said, all season. Is that where they lost the Super Bowl, they didn't get it done again? Like, where's the threshold in terms of wins that counterbalances his behavior? Or is there a level where, they lost the first round of the playoffs again, but we saw a lot of growth out of Nick Sirianni and how he handles things? Like, where do you think it's balanced? Where's the weight land? I
think so. Before our conversation, I would say the threshold was around was around wins and getting to that big game. But after speaking with you guys, I think the threshold right now is just growth, like showing the signs of maturity, man. Like showing that your quarterback and you are in so sync that nobody can question you guys again. Like just having that, because you're gonna have consistency at his locker room as long as everybody's healthy. Like this is gonna be a boom or bust offense. This could be potentially a pretty decently good defense. But then you got to show growth as a head coach. You got to show that you are the guy, not that people need to question if you're the guy at this point. Because we've seen great things at FM. When the team was 2-5 and he was calling plays, it was pretty low, right? But then he handed the reins to Shane Steichen. They turned it around, went to the playoffs, lost to the Bucks. But you had the feeling like this is a potentially good and budding head coach. Super Bowl season came. We enjoyed the sideline antics, but like Mike mentioned before, like it just at some point it becomes too much. at some point you're just doing a little bit too much. Like you're too much of the class clown and you're enjoying that way too much at this level. I just think a sign of growth and maturity, a sign of growth where you see this locker room being as tight as it once was, where AJ Brown is not being questioned as to why he's not speaking for weeks. Nobody's questioned as to why the play calling is terrible or why Big Dom has to be on the sidelines, like things of that sort. Like it just you gotta find that happy medium. I feel like if you're growing in the right direction, there's no chance he gets fired. But if you're doing stupid things on the sidelines and your team is struggling mid-season, get to the playoffs, knock down the first round again, like you got to remember they invested big money in their wide receivers this offseason. They invested big money in the running back. They invested big money in Jalen Hurts last season. Offensive line, like this is a passing league at the end of the day. Like the offense puts the seats in the ass in the seats, right? Defense, wins you championships, but the offense, brings the money. This is your money season. Like this is the best you're gonna have of a core of offense, and you just gotta like to fumble it. You really gotta be like a bit of an asshole, in my opinion. Like that's one way to put it. Like you gotta be an asshole just to fumble this.
Yeah, and I think you got to remember that no matter what we think or the national media thinks, the fans think, this front office believes this is a Super Bowl team. So, and they ultimately have the final say. So, I mean, I know they're dealing with new coordinators and the defense has a lot of question marks, but I still think that Roseman and the front office believes that this is kind of a Super Bowl or bust season. Now, like we were kind of saying earlier, if he doesn't look like an asshat, and if Jalen Hurts stops regressing and grows like he was 2 years ago, and if you're winning and winning in a good way, like even the wins they had last year, aside from the Miami win, a lot of those wins were hollow. They didn't look good all year, even though the record was whatever it was at the time, 10-1. They didn't look good. So if they turn that around and they look good, then they might be able to not win a Super Bowl and he might be able to survive. But I don't know. I don't think there's like a win total that saves him. I think it's everything that goes on with how the season unfolds. And it's going to be a really tough decision for the front office, because you remember like when Peterson's final year or two, there was reports that Lurie and Roseman would drill him the day after games on like Mondays or Tuesdays if he didn't pass the ball enough or he didn't run the offense the way they wanted it to be run. I don't know if that's still happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll say about Sirianni that'll kind of be a telltale sign about whether he has job security is how this team responds to losses, how this team responds to any sort of struggles. If there is, like you kind of alluded to, that where AJ Brown doesn't want to speak to media and it's kind of everything kind of seems distant, then that's obviously going to portray negatively on Sirianni. But if there's really no word of anything and they just kind of get back on the horse and, they, against in games where maybe they let a lead get away and they win an ugly game, those things have to be cleaned up the next week. And if they can respond in a positive way, then I'm thinking that Sirianni is probably managing the locker room pretty well. There's going to be slip-ups along the way. And if those, mistakes, if you want to call them that, which is, kind of a collection of mistakes to lose a game, if they can be managed and it doesn't kind of hinder the environment in the locker room of the team and get everybody kind of, on their woes, if you will. Like, what will the dynamic be like before, they face Baltimore? Will this team kind of feel like they're on their feet and moving with some momentum, or are they going to be dead going into Baltimore? Because that's an indicator of how your season's went so far. And then after that game, how do you play? How do you compete? Watch how the players compete against tough teams. Baltimore is going to be a very big indicator of just on the schedule, a place to kind of put your mark on where they feel about Sirianni. So, in games where there are struggles and there are losses, especially a potential loss, or against, tough opponents, because you're going to need that in the postseason, you want to see how the locker room is managed going into that and pay attention to kind of just if they're getting too high or too low in themselves and what is the source of it. And if it's Sirianni and he's running his mouth, all season because he has a tendency to do so, and he's not reading the room, that's going to be a huge indicator, probably primary indicator even, of how the team is really being viewed and how it's going.
I think I'd be curious to hear you guys' thoughts too on how heavily Nick Sirianni's success will be tied to the offense, right? Like, or vice versa, how much will be tied to the defense, right? Like, if this offense is putting up 40 points a game and destroying teams and should be blowing them out, but the defense sucks, is that going to fall on Sirianni? And then vice versa, if they're winning games but the offense isn't doing well, like, is that going to be held against them, right? And so I'm curious, like, how much of that balance between him and Kellen Moore, like before it was, Brian Johnson wasn't very good, and then Nick Sirianni got tied to him immediately, and this is clearly a relationship issue. How tied to the offense do you think he's going to be this year, or defense as well? Like, do you think the defense even matters at this point, or are they just going to blame that on players and coordinators?
I think there's a lot of space to show on the defense that if it will be players or coordinators. Like, there's a lot of things to think about this defense that we probably should be concerned about. That's aside from a coordinator, like at the linebacker position. I think that's a big thing you have to look at, even going through the preseason. Defensive backs as well. If the personnel isn't there, I don't think the scheme can be as effective as it can be. Now, last season, I think the personnel was there and the scheme just wasn't there. So this season, it'll be very interesting to see how everything begins with, throughout the preseason on week 1, if the roster's healthy. And I don't really know what the corner situation is going to be. I don't really think that'll matter because that'll change kind of frequently. But the linebackers, pay attention to them in the preseason because that's honestly just going to be one of the key things to beginning this season, and figuring out that the defense kind of does have the personnel to run the scheme.
I think it's an interesting balancing act, and I think when you think about the defense, you don't think about Sirianni right off the rip, right? You think about Vic Fangio, the veteran, the guy that's so praised in the NFL, right? So like, we know that the defense, the expectations of the defense are as minimal as can be. They have a ton of rookies. They have a ton of second-year guys. They have veterans who are aging out. There's a lot of more questions on that end, to where it's like you can't really pin that on Sirianni because that's not his forte per se. Especially with Vic Fangio there, like, you can't tell me Sirianni's gonna walk into Vic Fangio's office and say, "We got to do this way." Like, there's no possible way he's gonna do that. Like, you just don't do that. Like, in my opinion, at least, like, I can't imagine that unless you got Big Dom behind you. Like, you're not doing that. But offensively, like, that's his bread and butter. Like, that's why we hired him, right? He was supposed to be like the next kind of like offensive wizard or offensive mind, to go into the NFL, the head coaching position. And it's gonna fall directly on him because he effed it up last year. He effed up with play calling. He effed up with the scheme, right? And now it's like, what on the offense can you say is a weakness? I mean, people are going to say, hey, Jason Kelsey's not there. But Cam Jurgens is pretty damn good. What about right guard? Yeah, but Tyler Steen, and you have Mekhi Becton, who's actually fighting for the spot. Running back, you have Saquon Barkley. Wide receivers, like, it's such a hard thing to mess up. Like, you're giving something perfect on a silver platter. It's up to you to either fumble that or to just let it grow into his own. But he's going to be directly pointed to that just because of what happened last year, just because of what happened with the Jalen Hurts press conference, because of what happened with A.J. Brown last year, because of them signing Saquon. It's all going to directly point to him on the offense. Because, again, defense, like, you think about Vic right off the rip, and it's kind of like, yeah, that's Vic's defense no matter what. So if the defense falters, then, the Vic Fangio's getting the finger pointed.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see how Fangio deals with this younger generation of players, because there were those rumors some of those guys in Miami didn't like him. And just listen to Darius Slay talk. Not that he was criticizing him at all. I'm not putting that out there, but it was just like he doesn't really address guys individually. You have to. Now they haven't had formal training camp where they're all together and have meeting rooms and everything, so that's another part of that. But He was like, you have to go in and see him in his office to talk to him. Now, it's just mini camp, so I don't want to read too much into that. But that was a little weird nugget that I took out of the one interview that Slay did the other day.
So then, kind of based off what you were saying, Brian, if the offense sucks, God forbid.
Don't put that out there, please.
Well, yeah, I'm
Don't say things like that. What's wrong with you?
It won't. But if it does, do you still have any desire in, watching Sirianni walk out the door and then talking to Kellen Moore?
It depends, because there's a caveat to that. It depends if he is truly hands off, because I think a lot of us were led to believe that he was doing that last year, then that wasn't the case. We have to be sure that, like, okay, if this offense is going to suck, if we're going to make that, kind of like on Kellen Moore, we have to make sure that it's Kellen Moore and it's not Sirianni, like, influencing somehow, somewhat, who's going to be, in what formation, what personnel's out there, maybe what play call, even to that point. If we're going to put this on the offensive coordinator, it needs to be 100% on Kellen Moore's offense failing with all of these weapons. That's why you probably will be looking at an offense like at this construction of an Eagles offense. If you see it fail, you're not looking at the players. You're looking at it's directly on, the coordinator. But that could be misleading because of last season, and history repeats itself.
I mean, a good way to put it too, the Eagles offense, if historically looking under Sirianni, the Eagles offense has sucked from starting 2-5 to even last season. Historically, when he's not play calling, they went to the Super Bowl.
That's right. That is very true. If this offense comes out just guns blazing, heavily my assumption is going to be that this is Kellen Moore.
I'm getting a Kellen Moore jersey.
I wonder what number he would want you to get.
I'm gonna give Sirianni's favorite number on that jersey. But yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act. How do you feel about that, Mike?
I agree with everything that's been said. It's definitely a balancing act. It shouldn't all be on. I mean, it's going to be Moore's offense. I think that's pretty well known at this point. But yeah, Sirianni's got to be accountable, and he's got to be giving his input and CEOing it, as we talked about earlier. But one thing I do want to add is that I do think some of this has to fall on Hurts too. I don't think he should be left out of this mix. Like, I know, like, the guys love him and he talks to them individually and they all love him. And he's a good teammate and leader in the huddle and everything. But I'd like to see a little more personality, a little more accountability out of him, just emotionally on the field. When things going wrong, I like to see some emotion. Like, he's too cool. He thinks he's like the coolest kid in the room all the time. He's like this philosopher dropping these motivational phrases and catchphrases, and we eat it up at times. But I'd like to see him in a press conference like get angry or like give like a real answer instead of like some like cerebral BS that doesn't address the problem. I'm tired of hearing keeping the main thing. Like, say something, dude. Say something.
We're demanding attention from a star quarterback while we're telling the head coach less, or standing some emotion. I mean, not attention. I apologize.
Before we move
either
on,
way,
I just want to clarify. Like, I think Jalen Hurts should take some lessons from Mike, because if you read Mike's article from today, Mike had nothing but metaphors in there, like top to bottom. I forgot to mention that in chat, but like the whole squeezing the peach out of the Georgia tree, it was from top to bottom. He had the Jalen Hurts metaphors going.
See, you want more of that. I agree that you want more of that. And here's the reason why. No, honestly, I do just I think Jalen Hurts is a pretty great leader, so I'm not worried about him. He's going to keep to himself for the most part, and that's fine. I know the media hates him because they get non-answers and fun little poems and whatever. That's fine. just as long as you're a leader and you're leading this team, and hopefully that relationship begins to mend between them and Sirianni is the kind of the ultimate goal this season. I think the rest kind of follows as far as it will go. I mean, obviously you need a defense to kind of help with that offense, but as the ultimate goal that you want from this season is some sort of relationship between Sirianni or some reassurance, I would say, between that relationship of Sirianni and Hurts going a lot better. And if he does, and if that shows in some way, I think a lot of people will stop questioning it. But I'm also okay with the way that he's been approaching things too. Like, I think he's a terrific leader.
I'm not questioning his leadership. That's not what I was doing.
I know. I understand that. I mean, it's just mostly the way that he approaches the media. I got you.
One. Well, not even just the media. Just one little example. I think I put in the article I wrote the other day. Was, and it's kind of a minor thing, but that 4th and 2 play against the 49ers, and there's post-game press conference they asked Sirianni about, and he's like, well, there's a lot of game left, blah, blah, blah. And Hurts said that someone asked him, were you consulted? Like, what did you want to go for it there? And he's like, no, I wasn't consulted. And I'm not saying that you need to consult your quarterback all the time. You're the head coach. You make the final decision. But I would have liked to maybe Hurts stepped up a little bit and said, no, I wanted to go for it there. And I told the coach I wanted to go for it. Now you're going to start a controversy if you do that. But when the season's not going the way you want to and you just got blown out by the 49ers, maybe that's a little fire that you need to have. That's all I'm saying.
I think that he answers ultra conservatively for a reason. Like, if an answer is like, do you think it was, I mean, like, did you want to go for it? I don't think he would probably answer that, as short as he did. He probably would have elaborated a little more. But like, if it's he wanted to be conservative and, on the play calling, and he give the option to say, hey, did you want to be conservative? He'll just kind of be, well, I don't think that we were conservative, and kind of back out like that. So I don't know. I think it's a way of just answering questions to kind of just like, I'm not going to give you a non-answer and you can do what you want with that information type of deal. Like, it's a weird, it's kind of a philosophy of just answering questions, I think.
I'm curious to know, is it because we have a comparison, right? Like, so Bill Belichick is the same way as Jalen Hurts is.
Right.
And I know Bill Belichick aggravated the life out of the media, but it seems like that's, I mean, it might be the wrong term, but that seems to be like the winning approach idea. Like, because Hurts said that he learned this from Saban, to not feed into the rat poison. Philadelphia.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's 100% it.
But I get Mike as well. Like, you want to see, like, what we see out of AJ is what I would like to see out of Jalen at times. Because AJ is going to talk to you with passion. He's going to, like, I'll never forget. I was covering the Saints game that year that they went to the Super Bowl, and they lost the game. And the first person, like, the media was just looking to see who we speak to, and AJ turned around right away. He's like, okay, I'm ready for you guys. Let's do it. And he stepped up and he was just honest, like, just pure honesty that whole period, and just like letting everything out. So I get that portion, like, you want that out of your quarterback, right? But it just seems like with Jalen, like, I don't want anything that's not Jalen. I don't want him to change who he is for me, because I feel like we have a balanced dynamic now, especially with Saquon, who's, it seems to be genuine as hell and is going to, give it to you frank. But you have AJ, who's, more vocal outside, but you got, from listening to Saquon, you have Jalen, who's extremely vocal inside the locker room.
You know what they should do? They should to get a great barometer on the team, only talk to Landon Dickerson. That's it. That's all you do. That's all you get.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually a good point, Eric. Like, I think that I don't know, there's an opportunity here. We're talking about how different the front office is from other things we've seen. Like, this team might be a little different too, right? Like, I think that the quarterback is and as important as that position is, this isn't necessarily a team that's quarterback led all the time, right? Like, again, it always has to be he's the captain of the offense, always. You have to see some kind of leadership, but how that plays out within the team, it can be a lot of different ways. And you talk about a lot of really talented quarterbacks, not always the most outspoken guys. Now, I think that there's a bit of reading the room that Jalen Hurts needs to do. I think you are in Philly, right? And, a lot of quarterbacks that have stand the test of time in their cities. Like, they know how to talk to that audience. And so I think the one thing he does have to realize is that any answers or voids in the answer that he leaves, the Philly media is going to fill with drama, right? And so, I think that what Mike's saying is there's a couple of things that he's left unanswered there. And again, it doesn't necessarily matter how he answers, but he's kind of dancing around the question. He's being a little political about it. I think I'm with Mike in saying that there's certain times where he has the opportunity to set the record straight or to be honest and open what Brian's talking about, and he hasn't. And I don't think that's necessarily like, we need to get rid of the way he's talking, but the answer, man, like, you have a chance to say, hey, listen, like, this offense is different this year, and I'm enjoying it. That's an easy thing to say, but he doesn't really say that. You have an opportunity, like Mike said before, to say, hey, listen, I would have liked to go for 4th and 2, but I trust my coach. Like, this is the right thing to do. Boom, kind of answer solved. Right. And he just doesn't do that. He kind of leaves you hanging. And I think it's that part that kind of gets a little frustrating. And obviously, we talked about it. The Philly media is going to fill that with drama. That's what they do.
Yeah. How else do we get anything written, really?
Hey, me and Mike do pretty good job without being dramatic.
That is fair. I do absolutely agree with that. But
Mike is taking the crown on the punchline stuff. I got to keep up with that. But
that whole Sirianni versus Hurts thing that came up earlier in the offseason, not defending him, the non-answer or whatever, that was totally blown out of proportion by the media. But again, maybe if they had given different answers, more diplomatic, or just explained a little better, it wouldn't even gotten to that point. But we're nitpicking because he gives you nothing.
100%. He kind of brings it on himself, right? And that's the issue. You're like, okay, you could.
I wonder if he has like an entire manual of like, here's a bunch of
how to piss people off 101.
Maybe this, maybe that, maybe not. I don't know. Like, it's like a whole Dr. Seuss thing. Just maybe just kind of eventually gives you 1 fish, 2 fish. Maybe that's he just reads in books. Maybe he just brings maybe one of his press conferences will be he brings a book and just reads it until you leave. That would be fantastic. I would love that. As long as they're winning. I hope actually, let him win the Super Bowl and then do that. That would be fantastic.
Michael Gallup retired from the NFL.
Oh yeah, wasn't he got a lot of leg injuries? I recall, correct?
I think he had one major injury, right? Like,
I remember him. I thought he missed most of his season, or if not an entire season.
28 years old, retired from the NFL. Wow. Yeah, I mean, listen, I feel like we brought great points, and I feel like Mike stirred a little bit of a pot for me right now, because now it's bothering me that Jalen doesn't answer anything. So might write about that tomorrow.
I didn't mean to shift it. This is about Sirianni. We're talking about Sirianni.
No, but now, like, hey, like, listen, to bring it all together, right? Like, training camp starting. Is it an issue or is it a non-issue if Jalen does not bring to light the initial question he never answered about how involved Sirianni has been with this offense? Like, would it be an issue? Would it be an issue if he doesn't step up to the plate, or would it be a non-issue if he does step up to the plate?
I mean, I think we talked about it before, but I think wins and losses are really going to dictate whether or not it's acceptable or not. And you don't win or lose games in training camp. So I think it's permissible. I think you're going to continue to get it. And then we're going to see in the first 3 weeks how the season starts. And then questions are going to arise either way.
Especially around tough opponents. So that's really where you're going to find, your meat and potatoes and cogs and gears, whatever you want to say about how this team is going.
Yeah, it's a non-issue for me. And I think it's kind of fallen out of the media cycle unless Jeff McLean harps on it and it becomes a headline again. Otherwise, I think we're in the clear.
Well, sounds good to me. Hopefully Sirianni's in the clear this season. I'm excited football is finally back. I'm excited that on to listen to about Saquon and Tom journey with the Giants and leaving the Giants now. Which it baffles me how they handle that whole situation. But yeah, I mean, football's back. We're back every Tuesday. Mike, if you want to just plug in your information, I feel like we'll have you. I feel like Mike will be around a lot more in going
in the future,
in training camp and in the season. And I'm hoping that he brings his book of rhymes as well. So we kind of get that
I
going.
will. I didn't know. I'll get him ready for the next time. I got quotes from Thomas Paine over here. I got a lot of stuff going on. This is my year of reading, so I've been reading a lot of like classic literature and French and a lot of weird stuff. So yeah, it'll be fun. Look for little nuggets.
I'm curious about the weird stuff now. I'm curious about the weird stuff.
Existentialism, F. Scott Fitzgerald. I
This is
I got a lot of stuff going on.
Everything you're talking about right now goes against my next question. I was going to ask if everybody got NCAA college football, but maybe not. Maybe you're reading. Maybe.
No, Mike. There's no way Mike does not have this game.
It's been 11 years, right? Is that how long it's been? Something like that.
Is that?
It's been a long time.
It's a phenomenal game. What baffles me is that
Tackling, kicking.
No, it's a phenomenal game, but how the hell is this game so phenomenal? But Madden's been asked since I was like 15.
It's fair. That is fair.
Make sense.
Pretty much the same game.
It's the same game.
Yeah, playing modern Madden makes me want to go back to like 2007, 2008. 6, 7, 8 were just straight up heaters, and
even ESPN NFL 2K was 2K5, I think it was, with Terrell Owens.
I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. But
I can't wait for like a March Madness by 2K to come back. That'll be the fucking one.
I was thinking about this today, and like, do you remember? I think it was 2007. You could actually make your own playbook. Like, you could draw the plays and then have players run it. I don't know. It was either like, and there's nothing like that in today's game. It's amazing.
No. And mind you, like, it should be very involved in these games nowadays, because like you want to, you want people to go knees deep into your video game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could probably draw plays in the new one, but it's only Sirianni's plays from last year. Screen goes.
No one wants to draw those. I broke all of my pencils at the thought of drawing this.
HB dive here. HB dive there.
Yeah, double screen. Do a screen again. Screen again. They won't see it coming. Maybe another screen.
Draw play.
But yeah, Mike, we appreciate you coming on, man. Like I said, I'm sure we'll have you more on in the future. I think it was a very good educational episode. I mean,
we tried.
We'll have more material now starting tomorrow.
Perfect.
Hopefully, nothing too corny from Eagles training camp.
Now it's gonna be fine. We're gonna have so much to go off of. It's not even gonna be funny.
I'm curious about the battles that we see.
Do that. I think I did this last year, and I've done this before, where what he said, what he meant. So it's like
yeah.
The quote of what he actually said, and then it's my interpretation of what he meant.
I think that'll bang as far as like an actual report, because like that's kind of where we're all at.
We need a translator for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Eric Reese, Morgan Burkett. Mike, if you wanted to give everybody your plug before we sign off, just so everybody can find you, follow you, and follow your work.
Yeah, Mike Greger at Mike_Greger on X, Twitter, whatever they're calling it, and Philly Sports Network obviously is my main beat right now, and I do some freelance work for the Eagles website and whoever else wants to pay me money.
Show me the money.
Maybe I don't get any more Eagles gigs after I'm making fun of Jalen Hurts over there.
You know what though? It's a common thread. You're not the only one saying it.
I don't wonder.
But there are people opposing it, but you're not the only one saying it. So whatever.
The next gig is going to be Mike in a room with Jalen Hurts sitting right in front of him. Exclusive interview. So how you feeling today?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. I'll tell you off camera. I did have a one-on-one with Hurts on the Zoom with some of his people. I'll tell you off the air.
All right, we got to sign off now. We'll see you guys next week.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Yes, sir.
Flip.